that a quorum exists, permitting us to conduct business. To start us off, Marissa Angel Brown, PPS's Executive Director par excellence, will deliver her director's report and share with us a look at PPS's activities over the past year. Marissa?
Hey everyone. I'm just gonna I'll speak for a little bit and then I've got some slides to share, but I thought it'd be nice for everyone to get a chance to see each other in addition to the slides. So thank you everyone for coming on a snowy day, and I'm sure everyone has been kind of stuck inside for a couple days, and it's nice to see some faces other than your own family members or the people that you see who live next door to you. So thanks for being here. Um, what I wanted to do actually before doing the look back on the past year is sort of take a step back for a moment and think about where our work exists in the field at large. And so actually we're going to take like decades back step for a second. When the preservation movement emerged in the United States in the 1950s and 1960s, it was closely linked to community-based participatory planning. And here I'm thinking about Jane Jacobs. This is an approach to planning and development that makes room for community engagement and participation, and that relies upon transparency so that neighbors have the information they need about projects that impact them. As many of you know, the related emergence of preservation and this form of planning, community planning, were a response to the centralized approach of urban renewal, which not only did not open the door to community engagement, but used the powers of eminent domain to seize private property for demolition or redevelopment. The ethos of these earlier years began to change over the next few decades as the preservation field became more narrowly focused on advocating for sites of architectural significance, which tended solely to benefit elites, and the connection to participatory planning, which had been so strong in the 1960s, kind of grew weaker through the 1980s and 90s, or for many organizations was sometimes lost altogether. In 2026, this year, our 70th anniversary year, PPS is continuing work that was really articulated with the adoption of our current strategic plan in 2021 to realign our work more closely with this spirit of broad and inclusive civic engagement of the field's founding era. At the same time, new things are happening around us. The context is changing. We're joining with environmental and climate-focused advocates to innovate new policies, new initiatives that promote and incentivize adaptive reuse and the reuse of historic building materials, which are all at heart preservation practices and always have been. One of the central tenets of PPS today, which you'll see in the presentations that follow, is that to be successful, preservation work really has to address systemic issues that lie beneath the surface of the buildings that tend to get associated with our work. When preservation does not address these systemic issues, we become firefighters, responding to the week's crisis that was actually set in motion months or years ago by policies or procedures that were often set by the city or the state. So what kinds of systemic issues are these? These are issues that can include policies that incentivize demolition and new construction over adaptive reuse, labor and training systems that tend to skill for new construction, planning processes that don't take community input into account, or a media landscape that doesn't really cover things like planning, development, and zoning, leaving people uninformed and also unable to make their voices heard. Preservation often wins when policies incentivize adaptive reuse, when communities have the information and the power to participate in planning, and when property owners can hire the skilled artisans who maintain older buildings. And I wanted to begin by laying this out because I think, one of the central challenges of our work at PPS, being such a small office and bigger board, is really setting our aperture in the right place to include work on systemic issues, but only those that are most relevant to our mission. And it's really difficult to get this right. Once you open the aperture too wide on some of these systemic issues, it can feel like an organization like PPS is working on just about everything under the sun. But when you constrict that aperture too narrowly, you can kind of go back to no longer working systemically, being responsive to kind of the fire of the day. So a lot of the challenge, I think, internally within the organization is trying to find that right balance between what belongs kind of inside the frame and what feels too far afield. I am constantly inspired by our little PPS team, and I would love them all to just wave a hand to indicate that they're here. And I think many of you who are on this call know their work already, but they're just fantastic colleagues and thinkers, and they're inspiring, I think, to all of us every single day. Same goes for the board. If you're a current board member of PPS, please just raise your hand. And if you can work the emojis, Katie, that's great. Then work the emojis. And same if you are on our advisory board, just please give a little wave. I just wanted to acknowledge and thank all of the people who do this work along with us. So that's just a bit of a preamble. I'm going to run through quickly and go back to sharing slides so that we can get a sense of the year that we have just come through. Can you all see that first slide? Great. Okay. In the year that just ended, there were so many people who participated in PPS programs, engaged with our news coverage and advocacy online, and learned about the city's architecture and beloved places through the Guide to Providence Architecture. This slide tells the story of the thousands, even tens of thousands, as you get down to the bottom section, of people who benefited just in 2025 alone from PPS's research, education programs, and advocacy. Our social media users in 2025 grew by about 45%, and the page views of the Guide to Providence Architecture jumped 25%. The number of people who continue to find and use the Guide to Providence Architecture is amazing. In addition to what I've given you here, you can see that there were 50,000 individual users just in 2025 alone. Social media following is also going up, and we really use social media we're not really sort of just putting out any old thing. Like, we're often publishing news stories. We're publishing stories about buildings that have been added to the Guide to Providence Architecture. So we think about it as a really rich way to communicate with people. We added about 1,000 more followers just in the last few weeks once we introduced our Most Endangered Places list. And this is, these numbers here represent really the people who allow us to do this work. And many of you are gathered with us today. I'm showing you some data on our community last year. What's notable, I think, is the number of new people who joined PPS for the first time as members. This number was much higher than it was in years past. We had an overall growth rate in membership of about 7%. And we continue to be really grateful to the individual and institutional donors, the members, the corporate members who joined our new program, Business and Civic Leaders for Preservation. The financial report that Kathy will share later in the presentation shares more details about the year in development, but I just wanted to say now and thank all of the individual and institutional donors because we not only hit but exceeded almost all of our targets in the year that just passed. And this right here is the numbers of corporate and institutional members who joined our new program. And I worked with a board subcommittee through the first half in 2025 to sort of revise our corporate membership program, which was formerly Partners in Preservation. And we were really excited to have all of the people that you can see here, all of the institutions join with us last year. Okay, so we're going to recap the year pretty quickly to move on to some of the other items of business today. And so I wanted to start with advocacy highlights for the year. The headline listing last year was parts of the 02908 zip code, including Elmhurst, Smith Hill, and parts of Wanscook, due to the highest number of building demolitions in the city, and the rapid rise of investor ownership, which is pricing families out of this affordable neighborhood. You'll hear more about this towards the end. In the time since we released this data last year, the City Council passed ordinances limiting tax lien purchases and banning rent-setting algorithms to reduce investor-driven displacement. Discussions of a potential student impact fee in neighborhoods like this one remain ongoing. And I wanted to recognize Katie Pickens for this work, as the data that you see here, the maps that she created last year, have continued to generate discussion and policy changes and have really catalyzed a lot of policy movement in the last year. Most Endangered Places lists from last year. Work continued throughout the year after we had introduced our MEP list. We restarted the Cranston Street Armory Coalition with West Broadway Neighborhood Association. We'll begin meeting regularly this month to build an advocacy and organizing plan for 2026. Atlantic Mills was also an MEP listing last year. We published the Atlantic Mills Anthology featuring reported stories, essays, photographs, a timeline, all available in English and Spanish. And we've continued to advocate for a redevelopment plan that balances needed repairs with affordability at this small business and makers hub. The third, one of the other MEP listings, privately owned public spaces, Collier Point Park. Following this listing, we created a summer internship for this summer for a law or policy graduate student to review land use agreements and assess compliance issues and public access obligations associated with the creation of these spaces. And for people who don't know, these are spaces that are privately owned but are legally required to maintain public space, often as a result of a tax stabilization agreement or a zoning variance. The city makes these agreements, but it does not track, monitor, or publicize them. So this was something that we listed last year and began working on, and we'll go much deeper with this summer with a full-time fellow. Advocacy lowlight. This was something we spent a lot of time on and not unsuccessfully. The Gilbert Stewart Middle School demolition took place in 2025. We worked with community organizations and neighbors on the South Side and West End. We believe that this demolition exposed fault lines in the processes followed when Providence Public Schools Department and RIDE, Rhode Island Department of Education, assess and decommission buildings. And you'll hear a little bit more about that later tonight, this afternoon. Research. In 2025, we released this interactive map that can be searched by address. It's on our website for people who haven't found it yet. You can kind of see where it lives on the bottom right. What's great about this list is that now if you have got a question about a location in Providence, you can type it into the address search function. You can find out if it's in a Providence local historic district or if it's in a National Register district. This was something that was really hard to do before, and it took countless hours internally at PPS when we were trying to figure out whether a place was both in a city district and a national district, and now people can find this information for themselves. The Providence Post, we celebrated our 1-year anniversary in 2025. Last year, we published 96 stories about people, places, and policies that shaped the city, with special attention to heritage, planning, development, architecture, gentrification, neighborhood change, and Providence's history. This reporting initiative is a critical building block for our advocacy and policy development. It really informs us within the office and the board just as much as it informs public readers about what is happening across the city. We are the only media site that consistently covers monthly city commission meetings related to land use. We do this reporting because it informs readers about how land use decisions are made and by whom, because it keeps decision makers accountable to the public, and because it often provides actionable information to other community organizations and organizers across the city. We're gratified by the response we've gotten locally and nationally too, as our articles tend to show up actually almost every other week at this point in the national media newspaper, the Architect's newspaper, in their top three what we are reading section. Someone from their editorial board is reading the Providence Post, and that's been really great to see some of the news, not just for ourselves, but some of the news about Providence making its way out nationally. Through the Architect's newspaper. So I'm showing you here, these are the 5 top most read stories of the year. And I want to recognize Keating Zelenki and Katie Pickens, who single-handedly run a weekly newspaper with really, really well done and ethical reporting. And that I think really is starting to become a go-to source in the city for people who want to stay on top of what's happening in the city. In trades training, we offered 4 programs this year on different aspects of the preservation trades and adaptive reuse, most of them at the Isaac Hopkins House. We ran multi-day workshops on restoring historic staircases, repairing and rebuilding historic stone hearths, and working with historic doors, hinges, and hardware. We also ran 2 programs on the challenges of adapting historic houses for greater energy efficiency. The trades training programs were supported by the National Trust for Historic Preservation and the city's parks departments, and we really couldn't have done this work without them, so I'm really grateful to that support. In 2025, we phased out the Planning and Architectural Review Committee as it evolved into a new committee we'll talk a little bit about later on. But PPS continues to work with developers who own properties in historic districts and are seeking guidance for how to integrate new builds or expansions with the existing fabric and with the Historic District Commission's standards. In 2025, we organized 3 of these charrettes with preservation experts, many of them here on Zoom with us, including Corey DeBoer, Clark Shuttle, JP Couture, and Ron Honorado, whose feedback in these 2.5-hour sessions really significantly changed proposed designs for the better at 64 Angel Street, which I'm showing you on the left. The site next to the Benefit Street Armory, so it's not the Armory, don't worry everyone, but it's that little parking lot that's just to the left if you're looking at it, and 20 Olive Street. On the bottom, I'm showing you an old picture when it was still on Wickenden Street. It was moved to Olive Street, and when it was on Wickenden, it was the Providence Shelter for Colored Children. So we ran all of these charrettes with Providence Architecture and Building Company, and we'll be getting the word out early this year that we are always there to organize these stakeholder charrettes on a case-by-case basis. The Festival of Modern Design happened in October, and it was a lot of fun and a huge success. We had an entire week of programs and plans, including a day-long symposium on planning history and modern architecture with partners at Brown the day before. And for many who are on this Zoom, you remember it well. We see our fearless board president there on the top right, and her husband outside of, I think, one of the most beloved houses on the stop. And then the skateboarding program that we did downtown was also a lot of fun. It was a really great week, and we're excited about next October's, or this October 2026 festival. Here are some of the homes that were open on that day, all of them built between 1950 and 2016. It was really great through this festival to contribute more research on architects like Lester Millman, Dominic Thomas Russillo, and much is already known about Ira Rakitansky and Friedrich St. Florian, but for people to be able to come into some of their homes, they really enjoyed that. We had about 740 people attend the festival. 66% of them were from Providence, but we had visitors from Buffalo, Syracuse, DC metro area, New York metro area. We had our longest distance visitor come from Ashburn, Virginia. And then this is just this is the year in media clips, which, hold on, I want to go first to a video. Just give me 1 second. Okay. This can play um, on me. Oops. Okay, this is one of the last pieces of 2025. Let me just make sure it's playing. Okay. As many of you know, PPS's board made the decision in 2023 to sell Shakespeare's Head, or 21 Meeting Street. The building was owned and stewarded for close to 50 years by the Shakespeare's Head Association, and it was transferred to PPS and the Junior League of Rhode Island in 1985, when the association began to decline. In 2015, PPS became the sole owner of the building. In 2024, PPS issued a request for proposals for its sale, and discovered the house's first owners enslaved at least two people there in the 18th century. At that point, we paused the sale. We're able, with the help of the 1772 Foundation and Rhode Island Foundation, to hire a historian to do a deeper dive into the home's history. And then in 2025, we relisted the Shakespeare's Head through an RFP process that now included a much deeper sort of sense of the history of this building, including the stories of Ingo and Fanny, who were two African American women who were enslaved in the house in the 1770s and 1780s, and an enslaved man named Primus King, who worked on the printing press. We received strong proposals, and the board chose to sell the building to a foundation that has established the Center for Reflective History there, a new nonprofit organization that will work to uncover, preserve, and explore the social histories associated with the building over 2.5 centuries. The sale was finalized last May, and we look forward to partnering with the new center in the work ahead. And I just wanted to show you some of that video that Dave Lawler made for us during that process, which was a really beautiful video. And it's actually still on YouTube. If anyone wants to find that or use it, it is publicly accessible. Getting to the end, this is the year in media clips, which covered our Most Endangered Places list last year and associated research on the 02908 neighborhood, the Shakespeare's Head sale, Atlantic Mills reporting and advocacy grant-funded research into sites that are associated in the city with LGBTQ history, and then some of our advocacy around the demolition of Gilbert Stuart Middle School. And that concludes the whirlwind tour of 2025. And I did want to say, if you are a member of PPS, if you donated to PPS, rest assured we worked so hard for the money in 2025. And that's just sort of a quick overview of all that went on in the office this year. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Kathy.
Thanks, Marissa. Oh my gosh. Are you guys as impressed as I am? That is utterly incredible. What an amazing year. Thanks again. The support makes it happen. I'm incredibly proud of the work we've done. It's truly extraordinary. Our next order of business is a report on the financial picture of PPS. Kevin Hunley, PPS's treasurer, can't be with us, sadly, so I'm going to be him. And please bear with me. I am absolutely not an accountant. So let me begin by presenting the budget to actual summary for 2025. In a very difficult year for nonprofits, PPS achieved a budget surplus of about $10,000 with gross revenue of about $707,000 and expenses of $697,000. This includes the revenue from household and corporate memberships, the annual fund, investments, and event sponsorships. In 2025, we can call it our year for exceeding. We exceeded most of our individual fundraising targets. We exceeded the amount raised through household memberships by about $16,000 or 22%. 32%. See, I told you I wasn't an accountant. We exceeded our annual fundraising target by about $33,000 or 21%, and we exceeded our festival sponsorship target by about $20,000 or 45%. The only target we didn't quite reach was our corporate membership fundraising goal, which came short by about $7,000 or about 15%. It was partly a consequence of delayed outreach as we redesigned this membership package. So I'm hopeful that next year we'll see a stronger number there. In our last 10 years of tracking, 2025 set fundraising records for household membership and festival sponsorship and raised the second highest amount recorded during that time through our annual fund. In 2025, the total expenses of the organization were about $697,000. PPS's highest costs remain staff and consultant salaries at 68% of expenditures. The second highest cost is maintenance of the office at 7%. PPS's financial position was strong at the end of 2025 with total net assets of over 5 million. The cash and receivables balances decreased slightly while the investment balances increased. PPS's endowment and investments continue to provide the organization with about 15% of our annual operating costs. The balance sheet reflects the closure in 2025 of a line of credit with the Providence Revolving Fund, which I am delighted to say is done. I mean, we love the revolving fund, but nonetheless, we had a balance of $373,000 at the end of 2024. This line of credit was obtained to cover the increased construction costs of renovations to 28 Meeting Street or our headquarters that surpassed the amounts raised by the capital campaign. The line of credit was paid off with proceeds from the sale of Shakespeare's Head. In 2025, PPS made the decision to remove fossil fuel stocks that were held as part of our investment portfolio. We made this divestment decision to better align our investments with our mission and programs, given that our work in both policy and trades training prioritizes adaptive reuse and other sustainable building practices. This concludes the financial report. I now have the pleasure to introduce our trustee, Barbara Sokoloff, who is the dedicated and capable chair of our Governance and Nominations Committee. She will present our departing and newly nominated board members along with our slate of officers. Take it away, Barbara.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kathy. And thank you, Marissa, for your marvelous presentation. We have three trustees who will be leaving the board. They are Jessica Buramia, the founder of Providence Window Works, Walter Conroy, the executive vice president and deputy general counsel at Citizens Financial Group, and Barry Fain, a long-term board member, the publisher of Providence Media, writer and civic leader. Barry has served on the board of PPS since 2020, and our bylaws only allow for 6 years of continuous service. Barry was inducted into the Rhode Island Journalism Hall of Fame in 2024 for his achievements as a writer, publisher, and advocate for journalism. As many know, in 1976, he started a weekly newspaper that would grow into Eastside Monthly. He has served on the boards of United Way, Moses Brown School, the World Affairs Council, the Waterfire Arts Center, and College Hill Neighborhood Association. Most importantly, maybe from my perspective, is that our fathers were bachelors together in the last century. I won't say what year. And they got married at a time very close to each other. And Barry and I were born 1 month apart. So it really gives me great pleasure to thank Barry and Jessica and Walter. I would now like to talk to the new trustees. At this time, I'd like to introduce the slate. Warren Curtis, who is a financial investor and longtime member of PPS's Finance Committee. Warren Jagger, architectural photographer, artist, past PPS board member, and past board president, with whom I've worked very closely over the last many years. Dan Nichols, president of the Foundry Associates, a longtime corporate member and a PPS partner. And Clark Shuttle, now a historic preservation consultant who served for many years previously on PPS's board as an ex officio board member on behalf of the revolving fund, but who is very highly respected for his work in historic preservation. In accordance with the bylaws, we now ask the membership to ratify these changes. If we were meeting in person, I would ask for a show of hands, but we will have to do this on Zoom. So I ask everyone present to please enable your video and indicate your approval for the nomination of these 4 new members of the Board of Trustees. Do we have a show of hands?
Yep, we had a show of hands, Barbara.
Okay, thank you. All those opposed, please raise your hands now.
I see no hands raised.
Wonderful. Marissa, we will now continue. Are there any abstentions? So
I
I'm
see no
pleased to
abstentions.
say the nominees are approved. I now present for your consideration the slate of officers for 2026. Moving from a co-vice president of PPS to president for a 2-year term, Kamaria Hayden. Each of the following is nominated for a 1-year term. Continuing as vice president, Catherine Pomplum. Continuing as treasurer, Kevin Hunley. And continuing as secretary, Bill Applegate. And joining the executive committee as president-elect to take on the board presidency 2 years from now, Pearson Buher. On behalf of the Board of Trustees, I move that the 2026 slate of offices be approved. Okay. Marissa, I think you were trying to say something?
I'll
Yep, I
second.
think no, I see people raising their hands to approve.
Okay, wonderful. Um, um, so then the board is approved, the executive of this slate of offices and the executive committee. No one is opposed. There are no abstentions. So the slate of offices is approved. Kathy Lund, our departing board, I don't like that word departing, our leaving board president, would like to thank the departing board members for their service, recognize past board and committee members whom we lost in 2025, and present the President's Award.
Thank you so much, Barbara. Um, I'm so excited. We have such a great slate of officers, and yeah, if everything is looking great. So I would truly like to sincerely thank all of our returning trustees. I know it's a lot of work. Thank you for your continued commitment to PPS. Your guidance is vital to our success. And you've made my presidency so much easier. Thank you. I always know I can rely on you, lean on you. You were always willing to offer help and advice and support. You showed up, you paid attention. I truly cannot thank you enough. I'd also like to take a moment to remember the contributions of several former PPS board, advisory board, and committee members who we sadly lost in 2025. They are Linton Avery, or Jay Fluke. He was president of PPS's board from 2002 to 2003. William J. Penn, he was president of the board from 1987 to 1990. And Patricia Robb, who served on the board from 2017 to 2023. She was also on PPS's Markers Committee from 2023 to 2025. They I'm sure most of you know them. They all contributed greatly to this organization, and they are missed. They will continue to be missed. Tonight, I have the distinct pleasure of acknowledging the contributions of three individuals whose service to PPS, to our mission, and to the city has been lengthy and extraordinary. The President's Award exists to recognize those achievements. It's not an award regularly or casually given, and tonight I am very, very pleased to present this award to three remarkable advocates for historic preservation. This year, three President's Awards are being given out to Cornelius DeBoer, Lucy Searle, and Deming Sherman. Even though I will announce these awards today, we really wanted an opportunity to gather in person to celebrate Corey, Lucy, and Deming, and also the work of our departing and new board members. We're looking at dates and a location now, and we'll share information with all of you shortly. For today on Zoom, I'll try to make this as special as each of them deeply deserves. Corey DeBoer is a preservation architect as principal and sole proprietor of Hayes DeBoer Architecture and Preservation. He was born in Amsterdam, received a BFA and then a Bachelor of Architecture from RISD, and served on the faculty there from 1973 to 2005. His firm has had a hand in preserving and restoring almost every major landmark in the area, including both the old and new state houses, Slater Mill, the Rhode Island Historical Society Library, the First Baptist Church, the John Brown House Museum, the First Unitarian Church, the Art Club, the Providence Athenaeum, Swan Point Cemetery, and many of RISD's historic campus buildings, among others. As so many of us know, Corey has also left an indelible mark on hundreds, probably closer to thousands, of the city's historic buildings through his service on the Providence Historic District Commission from 1988 to 2023, where he was known to give project architects and developers valuable suggestions that often positively changed their designs. He continues to offer this behind the scenes consulting at PPS's stakeholder charrettes, which Marissa described earlier in the presentation. Barry is remarkable and utterly devoted to our city's historic heritage. And I am so proud to know him and have learned an incredible amount from him. He is an absolute hero to preservation.
Oh boy.
Courtney, would you like to say a couple words?
You're making me blush, Kathy. Again. My goodness, this is humbling, but thank you. Thank you very much for that. Much appreciated. I look forward to seeing you in person, and where I can give you a hug.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
So our next awardee, Lucy Searle, served on PPS's board for more than 20 years and was board president from 2012 to 2013. It is impossible to characterize Lucy's work succinctly. She's a developer, downtown visionary, nonprofit entrepreneur, urban farmer, and ardent preservationists, and she has played a central role in the founding and growth of many Providence mainstays, including AS 220, Farm Fresh, Grow Smart, and the Revolving Fund. Her decades-long relationship with PPS began in 1990 when she led a campaign to save over 500 pieces of terracotta from the outlet department store just before the entire 1891 building was demolished, taking pieces out hand by hand over the course of 6 months with a crew that included some others who are probably here tonight. This group sold the terracotta, netting $50,000 for PPS. Lucy then went on to organize a charrette for Shepherd's department store, then vacant, which put 7 teams to work envisioning possible future uses for the building, resulting in the building's adaptive reuse as the home of URI's School of Continuing Education. Lucy is an absolute force of nature, and her continued belief in our ability to get things done is nothing short of inspirational. She leads by example. Lucy, would you like to say something?
This is a tremendous honor. I thank you very, very much.
Thank you so, so much. And our last honoree, last but not least, we're alphabetically going through this, is Deming Sherman. Deming served on PPS's Board of Trustees from 1990 to 2004 and was board president from 1996 to 1999. From 1969 to 2017, he was a trial lawyer specializing in environmental, business, public utility, and probate litigation at Edwards and Angel. Deming was managing partner from 1986 to 1994 and chairman of the litigation department from 1983 to 1986 and from 96 to 2005. Deming has had a long and distinguished career as a litigator and legal scholar, and has also been one of the city's most stalwart civic leaders through decades of service on city commissions and nonprofit boards. He served as a board member and board president for the following organizations in addition to PPS: the Rhode Island Philharmonic, Orchestra and Music School, First Night Providence, First Works Providence, Grow Smart Rhode Island, the Providence Athenaeum, and Festival Ballet. Deming has served as chair of the Capitol Center Commission, Providence Chamber of Commerce, the Eastside YMCA, and many, many other organizations that truly are too numerous to name. Like Lucy and Corey, Deming has been a mainstay of PPS's work for about 35 years, and we are so fortunate to be able to continue to call on him for his wise counsel, which we do with regularity. Let me reassure you, he has played a crucial role in many of PPS's legal successes over all these years. Deming is never too busy to help out, and he is an absolute role model of how to give back to your community. He is wonderful and unassuming and absolutely knows the value of showing up. He's a remarkable friend and a staunch ally to PPS. Congratulations, Deming. Would you like to say something?
I can't locate Deming unless he called in on someone else's. Deming,
Where
if
are
you
you?
if the chat box is open, so Deming, if you came in on someone else's account, put the name into the chat box and I can open it so you can say some things. But I've been scanning and scanning.
All right. Well, I'm not going to pretend to be Devin, but I think he would say he loves PPS. And
We did record this, so we can send him the recording when we
he's
fit
off.
also Deming in March.
So, this concludes the business of the annual meeting of the Providence Preservation Society. Let's all look forward to celebrating Corey, Lucy, and Deming together in March. I am now going to turn the program over to Marissa, who will offer us a preview of more to expect in 2026. Thanks, Marissa.
Okay, great. Yeah, and if Deming, if you came in on someone's account and you put it in the chat box, we can always enable that so you can say some words. Wonderful. Thanks, Kathy. I also just wanted to thank our departing board members, Jess, Walter, Barry, who contributed so much to PPS, and just add my voice to welcoming our incoming board members, Warren, Dan, and Clark. And Corey, Lucy, Deming, thank you for all you've done for PPS and the city. You're all inspirations. You each individually know how much time I take of yours. I continue to take of yours, not just on a monthly, but really a weekly basis. This city would not be the same but for your work and service. And I'm excited to get together in March and be able to celebrate you all properly. So I'm going to give you a very quick 5-minute look ahead, if you hold on to your hats here, for 2026. Before we continue the meeting with Keith Morton's presentation on the history and life of Smith Hill, some remarks from City Councilor Althea Graves, and then discussion of our 2026 Most Endangered Places list. So the priorities for us for the year, you're going to hear about them when we talk through the Most Endangered Places list. The MEP list has become for us, and has always really been for PPS, a way of announcing our advocacy and policy priorities for the year. So those you'll hear about in a moment. This is a little bit of a broad kind of brushstrokes of the other priorities we're working on in 2026, including always expansion of Providence's historic district zoning overlay. Next month, we're looking forward to the creation of the first local historic district in Providence's North End. The vote actually would have been today, but it got canceled for snow, so the City Plan Commission will hear this in March. We're expecting that 31 houses built between 1860 and 1965 will be added to the district, the historic district overlay. These are residences that include the homes of mill managers and supervisors, engineers, technicians, tradespeople. It includes mansions. It includes single-family homes. It includes triple deckers, multifamily tenements. It's really an intact mill village right behind Wanscook Mill, and we were really excited to, I can't say that, I'm going to jinx it. We are very hopeful that in March when CPC meets, that will go through. We have started some work on potential expansion of a historic district zoning overlay in Fox Point. So that's kind of doesn't even need to be said. You know, PPS is always working on that first point from year to year. Point two, this is really about policy. With the addition of Brianna Jordan to our team in July, we now have the capacity to work on developing policies at the city and even state levels that support preservation and building/historic material reuse through ordinances or other policy changes. This work relates to some of the remarks I shared in the beginning about our capacity as an office to address structural systemic issues in addition to the site or building focused work that we tend to be known for. In 2026, this will include policy development related to incentivizing sustainable building practices like adaptive reuse, deconstruction, and salvage, and working in a variety of ways to bring embodied carbon into sustainability conversations and policy circles here. Number three, research. PPS has always been a significant research center in the city. In 2026, we look forward to contributing new knowledge about the architecture and social life of the city. We have a few grant-funded projects where we just got good news within the last 4 to 6 weeks about projects that we are now able to tackle in 2026. That includes research on the city's LGBTQ heritage sites and on the extant buildings in the city that were in use during the Revolutionary War. We are putting that list together. There are about 30 of them. Once all of the research is done on those sites, ultimately this will culminate in an advocacy effort to ensure that all of them are listed in the city's historic district overlay. Not all of them are, surprisingly, in an effort to protect them from demolition and significant change. One of our significant research initiatives this year already launched because we're working so hard that it's February, so we're getting a lot done in January and earlier, and that is the Guide to Urban Renewal in Providence. That, if anyone hasn't seen, we are releasing sections of that week by week in our newsletter. The entire thing exists on our website. It's really an amazing achievement that was led by Katie Pickens and Keating Zelenke. came up with the idea for the guide, researched, wrote it. It really presents kind of for the first time a reference, resource, and data about urban renewal in Providence in one location. Um, and they really deserve so much credit for wading through all of the kind of data reports, plans to pull it all together. We will be sharing news about public programs to come in the spring that relate to this resource. And then in 2025, last year, we incubated a new PPS committee called Providence Preservation Corps. That committee assists under-resourced community organizations in the really early visioning stages of a rehabilitation project in a historic building. We had wanted to hold the annual meeting at Gospel Tabernacle Outreach Ministries, who is our first partner with Providence Preservation Corps, but the weather interceded. But you'll be hearing more about this work as we launch more publicly and over 2026 get to work with more community organizations that need some visioning help. And then again, preservation trades programs. We are in the early stages of a couple of really exciting partnerships, and we will share more as we get into the year. But that work continues. So with that, we will move ahead with the meeting. But first, I wanted to thank Kathy. This is the last event where Kathy will be here as our board president. And I want to thank her for her service for the last 2 years. I really came in with Kathy. So for me, PPS board president is Kathy. It's no one but Kathy. But she, as you said, Kathy, about Lucy, you also are a force of nature. When Kathy is on your side, you are all set. She brings energy, purpose, commitment, civic leadership, a can-do spirit, and the most important ingredient, fun, to everything she is involved with. She has been an amazing leader, colleague, and for me, friend, as I've turned to her in, week to week, month to month, with challenging issues at the office. I think her time as president will always be remembered by the way she helped navigate PPS through a period of transition and growth that was launched with the current strategic plan. And I just want to add my voice to the mix, Kathy, to thank you for everything you have done.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, and so with that, I'm going to turn things over to Brianna Jordan. Brianna is the newest member of our staff. She joined us in July and manages policy development and our trades training programs. She's from Cranston and has a JD and MA in historic preservation from Roger Williams, and she will queue up our next 2 speakers.
Thank you, Marissa, and I'm very grateful to have joined PPS, and I look forward to carrying out our mission in 2026 and supporting all the neighborhoods in Providence with their preservation goals. So I have the pleasure of introducing Miss Althea Graves, the counselor for Ward 12, where we were scheduled to meet this evening. She's a member of several city committees that intersect with PPS's work, including the Committee on City Property, the Committee on Urban Redevelopment, Renewal and Planning, the Housing Crisis Task Force. And Graves began her work as a community activist in Providence in the early 1970s and has served on the board of the Providence Community Library, Community Action Partnership of Rhode Island, Smith Hill Partnership Initiative, Smith Hill Advocacy and Resource Partnerships, and the Providence Community Health Center's Board of Directors. So Ms. Althea, thank you for joining us today with remarks.
Thank you for having me. Hello, everyone. I really wasn't sure what I was going to be talking about today. After hearing all the accolades and wonderful things you guys have done over this 1 year, I have to say, wow. I have known all the things that you have been doing, and I love the articles from the newspaper. I think I missed a couple of them, but I will go back and reread them. But I myself have been doing community work for a long, long time. As I tell everybody, my mother dragged me kicking and screaming when I was a teenager to a lot of community meetings when I didn't really want to go. But she got my feet in the water and I just dive in from now on, ever since then. But I have been a part of a lot of things, but I am slowly watching the city change so drastically. Um, our communities, a lot of the communities, you don't even know them anymore. If you walk in, you're like, oh my goodness, things have changed. Some have been for positive things, but a lot of them, not so much. Um, I have seen the gentrification happening. I have seen where, things have been torn apart. I have seen where our rents have went so high that many people just cannot afford to live in our communities anymore. Um, I have seen where people have, just like I said, ran people out. Some of it had to do with COVID, but a lot of it had to do with people coming in, buying up these properties, and then renting them at such exorbitant prices that regular people just cannot afford it, and it's hurtful. I lived in Smith Hills for over 60 years, and like I tell people, I one time I used to know at least about 89% of my community, at least by face. Now I'd be lucky if I know 39%. I probably less than that. And it's kind of a sad thing. Yes, I know people move and, grow up and go on, and you want people to thrive, but you don't want the community to dissolve totally. Um, so I enjoy working down as a counselor at City Hall, and I am fighting to try to keep things so that everybody can stay in the city. We want the college students to be in the city. We want the professionals to be in the city. We want the small businesses to be able to survive in the city. We want the people that are living from paycheck to paycheck to stay in the city. We want everybody to be able to live here. Um, and we want for there to be a neighborhood feeling. We want you to feel like you're welcome, that you're part of it. And we know each side of town has its own different flavor. And we would like to see that. I enjoy PPS because it shows us the history and it shows us, some of the things, but it also shows us some of the mistakes that we've already done and try to stop us from making those same mistakes. And hopefully we can learn from these mistakes, learn from our biases, learn from all these other things that have torn us down before and help us to get past some of this. So um, I am really, really proud to be part of Providence, Rhode Island. This is my home. I don't plan on leaving it anytime soon. And I am glad that I'm glad we have a group of people that are out there fighting along with me to try to keep it going, to try to keep it the beautiful city that it is. Because I think Providence is beautiful. Even with all the snow, I'm looking out the window, it's still a beautiful city. It's not too big and it's not too small. So I think we need to just all continue to work together to try to continue to make it that way. Um, so I'm hoping that we can all work together to make it livable. I'm hoping we can all continue to working together to make it just the place that I've always loved. I want to be able to go into downtown and know that this is home. I want to be able to go into the mall and know that this is home. I want to be able to go across the bridge to Indian Point Park and say, "Oh, this is beautiful." I want to be able to walk all throughout the city and say, "This is my home," and be proud when people come in. I don't want to feel like I'm being chased out, and I don't want other people to feel like they're being chased out. So I will continue to fight on all those different committees. And housing is something that we really have to fight for. And we have to make sure that everybody has a home. We have to get rid of this homelessness. It's just gotten out of hand. We have to make sure that people are thriving. We have to make sure that we do the best that we can for everyone, you know, and we have to look out for each other. So if you have, reach back and give. My mother once told me, you know what? Never look down. The only time you should look down is you don't look down on anybody. The only time you look down is when you're looking down to reach down to help pull someone up, because nobody's better than anybody else. So we have to keep that in the back of our heads at all times. And we're all equal, and we need to all treat one another with respect, and we should treat our city with respect. And
Thank
that's really all
you.
I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss
Thank
Graves.
you.
I really appreciate you getting on here and talking to all of us. And yeah, we appreciate your time. And thank you for all of the service over the years to the city.
You're
Um,
welcome, Brianna.
thank you. Now I'm pleased to
Can I
introduce.
jump in for one
Oh,
second? Because
yeah,
we
please.
figured out where Deming was hiding. He was hiding under
Ah,
iPad 3. He was iPad 3. Deming, I think you are unmuted, or you can unmute yourself to speak now. Sorry about that.
No, I'm just a klutz when it comes to these things, and I apologize for. I did want to just say a couple of words. That's hard for a lawyer to do, but um, I, I, I've been involved with PPS since 1990. It's the most effective, credible organization in the city for the betterment of the city as a whole. It's just amazing, the advocacy that's done over the years, and the expanded notion of preservation, which is now incorporated in what Marissa talked about, is just terrific. I always viewed as advocacy having a couple of pieces to it. One is the verbal piece, of publications, education, appearing at hearings, and so on, which Marissa and others have done so well. But there's another piece, which is where I really came in my service at PPS, and that is going down in the trenches and trying to actually prevent um, inappropriate uh, development. And so I teamed with PPS and neighborhood associations over the years to actually go into the city plan commissions and also to the courts and even up to the Supreme Court to advocate for appropriate development, not demolition and inappropriate development. And the kinds of things that I got involved in were the Eagle Square project, where we were able to save most of the buildings, the Pittman Street project, which was a monstrous project that fortunately didn't go through, the Grove Street School that I tried to save with the neighborhood, and several other projects in South Providence. So that's the kind of getting your hands dirty type of advocacy that I was interested in, and I hope I brought some level of skill to that. So those are my comments, Kathy. I'm sorry if I overwent your restrictions on time, but I appreciate
You're perfect, Deming. Perfect.
I do appreciate this, and I thank you for the recognition.
Thank you. Thank you for everything you do for PPS and for Providence. Thank you.
Okay, we can go back to our regularly scheduled broadcast, Brianna.
oh, thank you.
Thank you, Deming. I'm glad we found you under iPad 3.
Okay, so I am so pleased to introduce Keith Morton, who will give a presentation entitled Smith Hill Reflections on History, Community, and Place. Keith Morton is Professor Emeritus of Public and Community Service Studies at Providence College, where he also served as director of the Feinstein Institute of Public Service until his retirement in 2023. He was interim executive director of the Providence-based Nonviolence Institute from July 2023 to August of 2024. A cultural historian, he has worked in the areas of community development, community service, and community theory for more than 30 years. His teaching and scholarship have focused on how we learn from experience, on service and nonviolence as practices of community building and on the historic and present meaning of community and service in people's lives. He is the author of Making Sense, Youth Gangs, Violence, and Practical Theory of Positive Change, and Smith Hill Stories of Community, and Smith Hill Stories of Community and Place, to be published as a digital book with Providence College's Phillip's Library. He is currently working on a book about the social and natural histories of the farm he lives on with his family in Warren, Rhode Island. Thank you for sharing this work today, Keith.
I think I got the wrong screen. Hang on one second. I think that looks a little better. Can everybody see that okay?
Yeah,
Okay.
looks good.
I want to start by just some thank yous, particularly Marissa for getting in touch with me, inviting me to do this, and Lloyd, who I think recommended me to her. And I'm really glad to see some friendly faces like Barbara Sokoloff and Kathy Lund. But on the left side of this slide is a map of the boundaries of Smith Hill, the neighborhood in yellow. And on the right is a Rhode Island Historical Preservation Society report that came out in 1980 that Mac Woodward authored. And I think I saw Mac join this group a little bit ago. And I want to thank him publicly for sharing his wisdom with me when I was just getting started at Providence College and getting to know the neighborhood. And I think it's still one of the best introductions to the neighborhood that's available. So really extraordinary and something to be thankful for. So I thought of a lot of different ways to approach this presentation today. And rather than just giving you sort of a working history of the neighborhood, I'd be happy to do that for anybody who wants to get in touch with me. But I've been thinking a lot about what's happening to our neighborhoods in places like Providence. And really deeply local places that people have home and where they live out their lives. And I wanted to begin with an observation by Maxwell King, who's the biographer of Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, right? So, and Max King writes, in our era, the geographical concept of the neighborhood in the United States is vastly diminished. And I want to turn that into a question and ask you all to think with me about, is it diminished? Miss Althea, when in her remarks, we have a 1-year-old in the house, so there might be a little background noise here. My apologies. But Miss Althea's remarks, noted the changes that are taking place in Smith Hill and throughout the city. And I think they're deeper than just gentrification or just the usual sorts of economic and social pressures that neighborhoods and political pressures that neighborhoods experience. And if the concept of neighborhood is diminishing, should it, or should it be something that we also try to preserve? And then how do we go about that? And one of the questions that have after having worked in Smith Hill for 30 years and having thought deeply about it as I was working on this most recent book about the neighborhood, is when I come back in 10 or 20 years, will there still be a neighborhood of Smith Hill in a meaningful way? And I think you can ask the same of a lot of the neighborhoods scattered throughout the city. And rather than try to do a theoretical or abstract view of this, I just wanted to tell you 3 stories about the neighborhood that I think capture some of its spirit and give us a starting place. And the first one is some of you probably know this Armenian Memorial Park that's at the intersection of Johnson and Douglas Avenues. In early spring of 2006, a dozen or so students and I were standing in a half circle around the Armenian Memorial at this intersection, and we were doing a collective reading of Peter Balakian's poem, A History of Armenia. The memorial and poem found the killing or forced exile of nearly half of Armenia's citizens under the shadow of the First World War. 1.5 million people killed and an equal number forced into exile. A number of these survivors ended up in Smith Hill, including the family of Harry Kazarian, who lived at 134 Chad Brown Street and for whom the local elementary school is named. The poem offers a vivid depiction of the genocide's trauma resurfacing as a young boy and his survivor grandmother look out at a highway construction project. Suddenly, the grandmother experiences a flashback and tells her grandson, "We are standing ankle deep in blood." Despite the gravity of the subject and the rawness of the image, I was feeling pretty good about the learning moment, recalling what's considered to be the first genocide of the 20th century, unpacking the memorial, sharing a sense of the Armenian legacy on this community, seeing the impact of the shared reading of the poem on the students, all making this history present and meaningful. We were about halfway through the reading when a man of indistinct age, dressed in rough canvas work clothes of an indistinct gray, stopped to listen. It was chilly out and he adjusted his stocking cap and ran a hand over several days of beard. "Excuse me," he said. I looked at him and then back at the page from which I was reading. "Excuse me," he said more insistently. "You're not teaching it properly." "Excuse me," I thought to myself, and I asked him to let us finish. "No," he said, "you're teaching it wrong." Indulging him, patronizing him in retrospect, I asked how we were wrong, how I was wrong. I'd done my homework and had led this exercise with all kinds of people, including the children of genocide survivors. "You're teaching it as if it is over," he said. "I've been here 6 months. I'm from Armenia. I was a dissenter. I was forced to leave because the Russians were looking for me. The conflict you are talking about has never ended." A little defensively, I told him we were a class doing community history, that as far as the neighborhood's history went, the important fact of the genocide was refugees coming to Smith Hill in the 1920s. But here he was now, an Armenian refugee working as a day laborer. And so we asked him to tell us more about his story. And as with so many other moments of learning I've had doing this kind of community history, his words transformed what my class and I had thought to be true. "I've been here 6 months. I'm a political refugee from Armenia." He went on to describe what it meant for Armenia to be a Russian satellite, his take on why Turkey continued to deny the genocide in light of its contemporary realpolitik, and the chances that he would ever be able to return home. He was living a few streets from the memorial, renting a room on Vernon Street. I saw him occasionally over the next 6 weeks and then no more. He had moved on to whatever was next. Through stories like this, I've come to more fully appreciate that then and now are abstractions. Punctuation marks we assign as we tell stories about how things came to be as they are. The more fundamental reality is that there is no beginning and no end. There are relationships and connectivities and continuations that we see or don't see depending on who is telling our stories and who is listening. And so many of the stories from Smith Hill begin to be at home with others. Will I ever experience it again? Another story about Smith Hill, immigration and community. I met two in 1995. A group of us had started a community garden in what is now called Lennon Park on what is now the footprint of Rogers Rec Center. Two and his middle school friends were vandalizing the garden as they cut school every day. We got this sorted out. The garden thrived until the rec center was built in 1999. And I didn't really talk with two again in 2007. He had started working for the Nonviolence Institute, where I was a board member, as a street outreach worker. His main job in violence prevention was supporting juniors and members of Laos Pride, a gang he had helped start and ran with when I first met him in the garden. It's a long story, but with many others, Tu and I started a program at the Rec Center for street and gang-involved youth and anybody else interested. And every Monday night for years. Tu and I became good friends. We taught each other about our quite different worlds, and I learned something of his and his friends' experiences as refugees from Laos and the camps in Thailand in the aftermath of the Vietnam War. Documentary Narikun, the story of a refugee from Laos, was released in 2008, and I decided to show it in a community history class I was teaching. I thought it would be powerful if the class could view it together with Tu and his friends from the Laos community. Tu asked first to screen it with his friends separately, and one random evening, I started getting texts from him every 15 seconds, every minute. Oh my God, we never knew this. Holy shit, we have to ask our families about this. And finally, I don't think we can watch this with your class. Narakun translates as betrayal. It is a documentary 20 years in the making that tells the story of Tavasut Prasavath and his family fleeing Laos after being left hanging by the U.S. withdrawal in the collapse of the secret war. They've narrowly escaped, threatened with imprisonment or execution, and come to the U.S. where they find little support in a culture that disorients and strains their family. Then a family member dies in a gang incident. Tu told me that he and his friends, the children of Laos refugees who had escaped like Tavi, who had been in a gang for mutual support, did not know much of this history. They found that it explained so much of their own experiences, of their parents' experiences, of their relationships with their parents in that generation. They needed time to talk and digest within their families and community before reaching outside. Again, the past became fully present and invited me to consider what it takes to feel at home in the universe. It is part of Smith Hill's gift that it is welcoming and a place in which people make sense of their individual and communal memories, integrating them into larger stories of identity and home. And a final story. This is the Smith Hill Library and a block party in front of the library, and me and now council member Graves, Miss Althea, when the part of Candace Street was renamed Mary C. Jones Memorial Way, and Mary Jones is her mom, as I'll mention later. But this final story, Smith Hill, its current sense of place and community and its resilience are not accidental. Consider this. St. Patrick's Parish on Smith Street remains active with what is now a largely Hispanic congregation, centered around a Catholic school that includes a sizable worship space. The local Catholic diocese has tried several times to close the parish and school, but parishioners have found ways to survive each time. In 2003, they raised $500,000 almost overnight through an emergency appeal, and in 2009, they reinvented the school as a free Catholic college prep high school called St. Patrick's Academy. St. Patrick's has survived in part because it played an extraordinary role as the host of a charismatic revival that was brought to Smith Hill in 1971 by the church's then new pastor, John Jake Randall, as part of a wider charismatic renewal movement that was happening nationally. Father Randall hoped the movement could be used to revitalize St. Patrick's after construction of the overpass near the State House led indirectly to the demolition of the main church and dislocated many parishioners. Attendance had begun to fall sharply. Even as many urban churches were struggling with dramatic declines in membership, a national surge of social justice energy was fueling the return flight of mostly white neighbors from the suburbs to the city in the early 1970s. This happened in Smith Hill, and it coincided with the charismatic renewal. These folks generally settled south of Smith Street, many of them living on or near the long ridge of, living south of or along the near ridge of Jewett Street, with the goal of being in solidarity with longtime residents in the spirit of the civil rights movement. They were motivated by the idea of a living gospel, which emphasized the practice of reneighboring the inner city and working alongside those most impacted to directly address racism and poverty. The inner city, as Smith Hill came to be called by politicians and journalists, was itself a product of the 1960s, as I'm sure most of you know, created by the building of highways and suburbs and the subsequent flight of white residents. Poor residents of color were boxed out and left behind. Local businesses were weakened or closed, and access to jobs, housing, and capital all became much more difficult. This is what return flight was intended to counter. Many of the new residents brought to the neighborhood by return flight and the charismatic renewal remain in the neighborhood today, and several more lived in Smith Hill through the end of their lives. Within a short time, the charismatic renewal movement and return flight intersected and inspired one another. Two prominent leaders were Mary Jones, whose family had earlier come to Smith Hill from North Carolina as part of the Great Migration, and who worked as the assistant librarian at the Smith Hill Library, and Tom Twitchell, who arrived with his family in the vanguard of the return flight movement in 1968 as the new minister of the local Presbyterian Church. Local ministers and congregations began meeting together, and one result was a genuinely ecumenical religious and social neighborhood ministry that began to address fundamental social issues, including racism, poverty, housing, education, healthcare, youth development, and economic development. A mix of old and new community members, including Tom and Mary, started the Capitol Hill Interaction Council, CHIC, as a collective community building hub, community organizing hub. Tom wrote about this period in his extraordinary memoir, That They May Be One, which he published in 1979. It was a simple approach, he wrote, from his command to love others. Loving our neighbor means feeding the poor, clothing the naked, bringing dignity to life where it has been lost. Life should have integrity and purpose, and we believed it still could despite the odds. Adopting an asset-based community development strategy long before John Kretzmann and John McKnight popularized the approach, CHIC launched a number of initiatives. The Butterfly Co-op sold goods produced by local artisans. Our Daily Bread was intentionally a food co-op rather than a soup kitchen or pantry, and had more than 1,000 members who saved between 17 and 50% on their food. The Earthen Vessels sold recycled appliances. Youth programs emphasized potential, agency, and leadership. There was outreach to returning Vietnam veterans struggling with, quote, alienation and loneliness. Drug intervention and counseling were offered through a program called the Shepherd Staff, started as one of the first locally directed social service agencies linking residents of the housing projects in the neighborhood and responding to growing problems with drug addiction, particularly heroin. Sister Janet Leduc and Kay Lovett, one of CHIC's co-founders, focused on affordable housing, organizing a tenants union in 1971, connecting neighborhood residents and residents of Chad Brown. A community garden on Osborne Street was started in 1978 by urban farmers and provided food, beauty, and ecological awareness, explaining some of the enthusiasm for the community garden where I met two in 1995. When federal anti-poverty efforts began funding community health centers, CHIC members led the way in convincing authorities to build a community health center in Smith Hill in 1973. Three CHIC-involved women, recognizing the intersection of domestic violence with housing and economic independence, Liz Melendez, Ann Cunningham, and Mary Jones, started Sueño House, the neighborhood's first domestic violence shelter in 1987. And Sueño House at 47 Goddard Street was a predecessor to the Smith Hill Community Development Corporation, which officed there for a long time, and which Mary Jones and Tom Twitchell helped start in 1992. CHIC firmly believed, Tom wrote, that the major resources to meet the major needs of our community were within our own community. CHIC valued economic independence, beauty, pride in Smith Hill, and positive growth as alternatives to loneliness and apathy. When it ended in the 1980s, CHIC left a practical and cultural legacy that continues to this day. It can be seen in the survival of St. Patrick's Church and School, in the surviving early childhood learning center and senior programs of the community center, until this community center closed its home building just around the corner from where your event was supposed to be happening tonight on Ruggles Street. It can be seen in the $30 million of affordable housing development completed by the Smith Hill CDC in its 30-year run from 1992 to 2025 when it closed, including its award-winning Renaissance project on Goddard Street. In the very busy neighborhood community health center, in the renaissance of the Smith Hill Community Library, in the election of Althea Graves, daughter of Mary Jones, to the city council. These intentional, interconnected community building efforts set the stage for and prefigured every neighborhood effort since. Chick was a neighborhood-driven beacon of hope and a source of institutional strength, arguing through its example that things can change when neighbors have a sense of community and shared purpose. Chick is the secret sauce in Smith Hill's resilience and strong sense of community. So I apologize because I'm a cultural historian and historians are not known for being very optimistic about things, but I try hard. But working on similar projects to what Chick did, many of them rooted in Smith Hill for most of my adult life, has convinced me that believing in and working to build community is a decidedly minority perspective. On the one hand, the institutions of our broader culture continue to reliably produce the social problems that communities such as Smith Hill experience and try to address. And on the other hand, our approach to addressing these solutions is becoming more fragmented and driven by external considerations. Development projects are increasingly compartmentalized, technical, data-driven, and fulfilled by professionals with credentialed expertise. Most of the time, these outside partners have great intentions and their knowledge is useful and even necessary. But this expertise comes at a cost. The interests of the external parties are informed by, but not driven by the community's interests. And their more rationalized approach squeezes out opportunities for ordinary people to act as citizens and community members, contributing to and benefiting from their local community, their neighborhood. Politically and economically, the social unit of neighborhood seems to be becoming increasingly less important. I was listening as you were rehearsing all the great work you had done in 2025 and thinking about your 02908 project and why 02908 became a catchment area of concern rather than just a list of buildings, and I think in large part it's because of this intense pressure on what's on communities like Smith Hill. And it is about demolitions. It is about venture capital. Is it about private pricing residents out of places? All those things are happening. You can see it in the shuttering of the physical community center also, in the recent closing of the Smith Hill Community Development Corporation, in the building of a mall that is detached from the neighborhood and separated by a highway, in the converting the Brown and Sharp foundry into upscale condominiums and apartments, and spurring speculative interest in nearby vacant industrial buildings and houses. Schools, especially elementary schools, are no longer tied to neighborhoods in Providence and not very much across the country. A truth amplified by the growing reliance we have on charter and private schools. Absentee ownership of housing is growing and gentrification pressures are increasing. Residents' places of work are increasingly in the first or second ring suburbs. Access to capital remains very limited, and Smith Hill is largely a food desert. All of this is counter to the people-centered, holistic approach to community building of Chick and similar efforts by residents since. It is increasingly difficult to put at the center a vision of community that invites people to join in and make for themselves a home in the universe. The trend is not a done deal, though. The alternative, championed by organizations like the Providence Preservation Society, is to see neighborhoods as being of profound importance and focus our policy, funding, institutions, investments, and individual efforts on strengthening the ability of people to do the work of community building in these human scale places. A genuine community, to paraphrase Wendell Berry, has real value. It is built on particular histories, on stories, on shared memory, and shared effort by Harry Kazarians and Twos and Toms and Marys and so many other people. We'll know it's working when it does a few things, some of which Ms. Althea referenced. Community is working when neighbors trust one another. A community is working when neighbors interact on a regular basis, when residents own their houses and stay for a while, when residents have a sense of community and cohesion if you ask them about it, when residents work together for the common good and are involved in community events and affairs. And lastly, when formal and informal civic spaces are available for gathering. This doesn't seem to me like a lot to ask. As a cultural historian, I'm not an optimist. I appreciate how things can go wrong, how the tide can turn against what seems an obvious good. On the other hand, my time in Smith Hill has encouraged me to remain very hopeful. I believe in the power of working together toward a positive future because, as Rebecca Solnit points out in this quote, it is the only way that a positive future has a chance. And I know that the last decade of grassroots organizing has given Smith Hill the strongest public advocates it has had in living memory in Althea Graves, Wally Kinby, Rebecca Twitchell, Alan Gunther, and a dozen others I could name. Residents turn out for each other, and there are many small signs of positive energy. So there it is, a variation on Martin Luther King's "Where do we go from here? Chaos or community?" And my question that I'll just leave you with, I'm really curious about is, will neighborhoods like Smith Hill still matter 10 or 20 years from now? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Keith. That was amazing. I think, yeah, I love what you said about that neighborhoods are profoundly important places. I think there's so much crossover in the work you've done, and Miss Althea, the work you're doing every single day, and also just generations in Smith Hill. Smith Hill's really been a model for community neighborhood organizing. Um, and for those who are speaking of optimism, optimistic that the snow will melt by March 14th, Keith is leading a walking tour in Smith Hill if we think that the roads will be passable by then. And that will be a great opportunity to kind of hear more and be on site the way we really hope to be tonight. And also, I think you guys saw it on our website. This was an adaptation of a manuscript that Keith is publishing this year. And so please let us know when it's ready, Keith, so everyone can kind of get a link to it. Thank you so much. We're going to race through the next part of the program so everyone can get their dinner on time. And that is the MEP list, the Most Endangered Places List for 2026. As you all know, we actually released it publicly when we had meant to do the annual meeting, so you may have seen some of the coverage of it, but we just wanted to kind of circle back and give everyone a little race through the MEP to end this annual meeting, as we usually do, which is a tradition for PPS. So with that, I'm going to share my screen again, and I believe that Keating will get us started.
Yes, I will. Hi, everyone. I'm Keating. If you don't know me, I'm a reporter researcher at PPS, and I'm just going to get right into our first most endangered place. Leading our most endangered places list this year are the resistance houses in Upper South Providence. There are over 50 acres of parking lots in the area around Rhode Island Hospital. Amidst this sea of asphalt, these 4 homes are a physical reminder of the neighborhood that once existed there. Make no mistake, these houses are at risk of demolition. There used to be a 5th resistance house, but it was already demolished between 2011 and 2014. Meanwhile, the still extant red and yellow triple-decker on Gay Street, which is pictured on the slide, directly and located directly across from the hospital, is currently under contract with an unknown buyer. Additionally, these houses symbolically represent the entire neighborhood of Upper South Providence, which is already undergoing some of the most dramatic development in the whole city. Providence is experiencing a housing crisis. Our low rate of new construction has undoubtedly contributed to a vacancy rate far below what's healthy for a city of our size. We will have to build if we want to ease the skyrocketing rents that are pricing residents out of the city, as we've heard from others tonight. In addition to the kind of outrageous home prices that prevent ordinary people, ordinary Providence residents from home ownership. However, it will take a significant amount of care and consideration to maintain affordability in lower income neighborhoods like South Providence, as we build hundreds of units at a range of price points. How do we ensure, for example, that these new units help house local residents, not just students and out-of-town transplants? How do we preserve the memory of a neighborhood that's been systematically destroyed? Are there opportunities to support homeownership in the area? And how do we ensure that South Providence is not the only neighborhood in the city to shoulder the burden of increased density and thousands of new units of housing? These are all conversations that we seek to start with this listing, and increased density and new construction are coming to Providence, but I don't say that, we don't say that to scare you or to imply that these are bad things. I think it's actually a really exciting time to live in Providence. But history has shown that it's important to carefully consider the wants and needs of existing residents before blindly developing on what the city would have you believe is already vacant land.
Thank you, Keating. The next listing is Providence Icons. The Industrial Trust and the Armory have been on PPS's Most Endangered Places List 12 and 11 times, respectively. Both structures have been included on the national list that are operated by the National Trust for Historic Preservation. On the right, the tallest building in Providence's skyline remains dark, and the People's Castle on the left is most often used as a soundstage for movie production, not for broader community benefit. We list these buildings together to advocate for saving them both, not just one of them, this year.
Hi, everyone. I'm Katie Pickens, and I'm going to talk about why, once again, the Industrial Trust Building is on our Most Endangered Places list. Redevelopment and reuse of Superman has moved forward at a sluggish pace, and High Rock continues to lead the redevelopment of this 1928 Art Deco style skyscraper, even after the death of David Sweetser last summer. The firm's plan to convert the building into hundreds of apartments, 20 of which would be reserved for affordable and workforce housing, is much needed as the city grapples with a significant housing crisis. But the cost of conversion has skyrocketed, while additional subsidies from taxpayers have become a tougher and tougher sell. Office residential conversions are notoriously tricky and expensive, but there are strategies for deeply affordable adaptive reuse of vacant office towers that are still being explored. Gensler and the Pew Charitable Trust conducted a study on these conversions in 2024, many of which are made difficult in part due to the layout of these towers. The study suggests that reintroducing flexible co-living, essentially dormitory-style living with private bedrooms and communal amenities, could add large amounts of affordable housing without requiring the expensive and extensive plumbing retrofits that traditional apartment conversions demand. Though this isn't the current plan for Superman, it shows that there are approaches to make these types of projects pencil out. We hope that soon the Superman building will no longer be a fixture on our annual MEP list, and that will once again become a community asset.
Great. Sorry, sorry, Marissa. I'm just gonna hop in real quick and just talk about the Armory. So we all know that the Armory, which is owned by the state of Rhode Island, has sat vacant for 30 years, and it's one of the state's most iconic historic buildings. It's made our MEP list for its 12th time this year. It was close to redevelopment until the contract was terminated by the current governor with Scout, a developer specializing in adaptive reuse of historic buildings for community use. And while the redevelopment feels uncertain at times, the West Broadway Neighborhood Association, along with a multitude of West Side and citywide community organizations and nonprofits, continue to champion the reuse and redevelopment of this community asset. We are not the only city facing challenges with adaptive reuse questions of this scale. Cook County General Hospital in Chicago sat vacant for 20 years and was threatened with demolition. It was listed many times on the Landmark Illinois list of endangered historic places, and eventually was redeveloped in 2020 and is now home to hotels, medical offices, a daycare center, and a food hall. Closer to home, New Haven's in Connecticut, Gough Street Armory, a historic property with similar massing to the Cranston Street Armory, is gaining momentum with a coalition of stakeholders and community members as they work to reimagine that armory's future. In 2018, an engagement study of the Cranston Street Armory emphasized that public access to the building was a top priority for the neighborhood, suggesting arts, culture, recreation, markets, and social services inside the building. Its current use as a movie studio does not meaningfully serve any of those long-term goals. As the conversation around the armory continues, it's imperative that the West End residents lead the reuse vision, and PPS advocates for a rehabilitation plan that ensures community use and benefits, which should be formalized in a legally binding community benefits agreement that reflects the residents' priorities.
Thank you, Brianna. I also wanted to share with everyone the proposal, the vision for the armory that imploded during a trip down to Philadelphia by some state staff. And I take this as a good sign. I was in Philadelphia this weekend because my son had a tournament, and we went out to lunch. And when I got back to, my brother had an Airbnb. We got back to his apartment. I had an email from Everett, who's the lead of Scout, saying, I think I just walked by you in the street in the old town of Philadelphia, either that or it was your exact twin. So I take that as a good sign that things are looking back up for the armory. And I think people were really excited by Scout's vision. Providence Public Schools. This is another one that has perennially been on this list. This year, we actually went back and kind of did the data. So Providence Public Schools district or individual PPSD schools have been included on the MEP list 30 times since 1994. In this time, PPSD has demolished at least 7 historic schools across the entire city in Hartford, Lower South Providence, Smith Hill, Federal Hill, West End, Elmhurst, Mount Hope, Manton, Blackstone, and College Hill. In the last 5 years alone, PPSD has taken down 5 historic buildings dating between 1916 and the 1970s, with plans to demolish 2 more in the coming year. Together, these 7 schools accounted for about 625,000 square feet, enough to provide almost 700 average size units of housing if they had been sold and redeveloped. With this listing, PPS calls on PPSD and the city to review the policies and procedures related to the decommissioning of its schools. We are really advocate for there to be in place a reuse first policy that's taken seriously, where if a historic school is decommissioned and is seen as not being fit for reuse as a school, there be a feasibility studies that are publicly available, that there be a really thorough investigation by people who really are experts in adaptive reuse to understand what these schools might become in terms of community benefit and use. We also list in our website with this MEP listing that we advocate for firms to be hired in school construction, school renovation, who have deep experience with adaptive reuse, and to avoid a kind of check the box process in which firms that have really no commitment to adaptive reuse or no specialization provide cursory recommendations on whether a school can be reused. We'll go further, and I would just say that we've been working hard on Gilbert Stewart and PPSD's policies in 2025. That will continue even into the next few months. You'll see us releasing some new things on PPSD. I think, Keating, it's back to you.
Yeah, so we've heard a lot about 02908 already tonight, specifically Smith Hill. But I'm just going to talk a little bit, give some updates since we listed it last year as it was on the top of our list due to the area's rapid increase in corporate land ownership and student gentrification, and that's taken place since the early 2000s. The good news, and Marissa touched on this earlier, but the city does seem to be listening to some of our and other organizations and residents' concerns. In 2025, the council passed ordinances limiting tax lien purchases and banning rent-setting algorithms. These measures will dampen the ability of corporations to buy land in bulk before city residents can even put in an offer on a home. Despite these very real efforts to address the issues facing O298, we remain concerned about the future of the area, which again contains parts of Smith Hill, Wanskuck, and Elmhurst. Over the course of 2025, 11 demolition permits were issued for residential buildings here. 8 homes were destroyed on a single pair of streets directly abutting Providence College and replaced with cookie-cutter triple-deckers targeted towards students. So this actually is on Venice Street. You can see all of the triple-deckers popping up around it, and I'm fairly sure 20 Venice Street, which is this house here, has also been demolished since this screenshot was taken. So yeah, all these triple-deckers targeted towards students, and many of these students will breeze into the area, some of them partying through their 4 years of college, and then abandon it once again. And this is not to mention the wastefulness of these demolitions, including the destruction of a home that was remodeled as recently as 2019. It's our goal to continue reporting on developments that affect these neighborhoods, empowering longtime residents to steer the future of their home. We will also continue to work in partnership with local community members, organizations, and public officials like Councilwoman Graves to find policy solutions that achieve more balance between town and gown.
This next one caused a bit of a stir on our social media and in the news, if you haven't seen it already. But the Providence Place Mall is actually the youngest building to ever be on our Most Endangered Places list. And it was placed in receivership in 2024 and has joined the countless malls throughout the country that are struggling to survive. Let's be honest, this carpeted behemoth may not be considered one of Providence's most architecturally significant buildings. But our inclusion of the mall is not for sentimentality, history, or even necessarily architectural beauty. Instead, it's to start a conversation about its next chapter and how we can guide this transition responsibly, sustainably, and in service to the people of Providence. Amid a climate crisis, we cannot afford to treat a functional building as disposable just because it no longer economically works in its current configuration. Successful mall conversions throughout the country show that reuse of these enormous buildings is possible and can lead to new housing, medical centers, classrooms, and more. Providence Place represents a particular moment of change in the city, as viewers of Secret Mall Apartment can attest. Shout out to those who actually got to see it in the Providence Place Mall. The mall came about during the city's Renaissance era when the city undertook massive infrastructure projects, including moving rivers and the railroad. Today, Water Place Park and the Riverwalk are being reimagined for a new century. Providence Place Mall's economic decline could become an opportunity rather than a crisis, and it should be reconceptualized in tandem with these projects that emerged in the same era. We can't wait for years of vacancy looking at you, Superman and Cranston Street Armory, before we start discussing what will become of this building. Whatever the mall becomes must be informed by thoughtful and intentional community engagement, much like the approach the city is using to reimagine the Riverwalk. At its core, a preservation mindset calls for not wasting what we already have. The mall can still be an asset for the city if we are proactive, practical, and wise enough to use our pre-existing resources wisely.
And wrapping up our list here with the Crook Point Bascule Bridge, which has become an iconic sculptural element of the Providence shoreline. This rolling lift drawbridge was first listed on the Most Endangered Places list in 2020 after the Rhode Island Department of Transportation, who owns it, announced plans to demolish it back in 2019. Despite a contest to reimagine the bridge in 2020 and general public outcry about its fate, we and other organizations, residents, people recently found out that RIDOT never changed course about the plans for demolition. Now the Crook Point Bridge's scheduled demolition date is fast approaching, and without swift action, we could lose this symbol of the creative capital's spunky spirit forever. PPS supports the transfer of bridge ownership from the state to a quasi-public municipal authority as was recommended in a recent resolution passed by the City Council and Mayor. It's our hope that the Rhode Island General Assembly will see this issue the same way, allowing the establishment of a Crook Point Bridge Authority to steward the transformation of this landmark into an architectural and cultural asset to Providence.
All right. Thank you so much, Keating, Katie, Marissa, Brianna, for such a great overview of MEP. Before we close out, I know everybody's ready to have dinner, and so hopefully something good in the oven is cooking and everybody's gonna go out and enjoy. I again want to extend a very special thank you to Kathy Lund for her outstanding leadership during her term with PPS. She's since joining the board in 2018 and serving as VP. She's brought vision, she's brought dedication, obviously underlying a deep commitment to preserving Providence's historic character. Her impact extends not just in PPS, but across the preservation community. As folks have mentioned, she is, on the board at the NAM, Preserve Rhode Island, as well as many years as commissioner on the Historic District Commission. I just want to say that, Kathy, your thoughtful leadership and your infectious energy is unique, second to none, and you have strengthened this organization and helped ensure that we have a vibrant future for the places and the people that define our city.
Thank you.
With that, I want to say thank you on behalf of the board and the staff for attending PPS's 68th annual meeting. We look forward to gathering together in person when it is nice and warm. Please, pray, fingers, whatever we need for some warm weather and melting of the snow. To celebrate the year that we just closed, to look ahead to the future, and for the many people who make PPS the organization that it is, just want to celebrate them. I will adjourn. I don't think that there's anything else that I need to do, Marissa, but I think, do we need to have a motion to adjourn? All right.
Very moved. So moved.
Okay.
In case
Well,
we do. Okay.
we'll carry the motion. I think we're going to say silence is assent in this. Have a lovely evening and look forward to seeing everybody soon.
Bye, everyone. Thank you for coming. And we look forward to getting together in person in March. I hope your road's clear soon.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.